Ghost story. Very scary, true horror stories. Oregon, a small town hidden among ancient pine trees. There isn't much to talk about here, except for an abandoned house deep in the northern woods. The locals avoid mentioning it. Too many strange stories. Footsteps on the wooden floor at midnight. Dark figures passing by the windows, even though no one lives there. And whenever a curious soul dares to step close, they always leave with terror in their eyes. Daniel learned about the house from an old article. He didn't believe in ghosts, but loved exploring places with mysterious pasts. He convinced Rachel, his girlfriend, along with Matt and Hannah, to visit on an October night. The air was colder than usual, and fog curled around the road leading into the woods. They parked by the roadside, right in front of a wooden gate, half broken. The house emerged, old and lifeless. Peeling paint exposed rotting wood underneath. A second-floor window was shattered, revealing only darkness inside. Matt aimed his flashlight at the front door. It wasn't locked. No one spoke. They exchanged glances instead. Daniel stepped forward and pushed the door open. A wave of damp, musty air rushed out, mixing with the freezing night. The inside was pitch black. Rachel turned on her flashlight. Dust coated the floor. Heavy, untouched curtains hung in place, as if no one had disturbed them for years. They moved into the living room. A torn-up sofa sat in the center, and an old coffee table held a few scattered newspapers. Daniel crouched and picked one up. A headline caught his eye. Family mysteriously vanishes in northern woods home. The faded photo beneath showed 4 people standing in front of this very house. No details about what had happened. They had simply disappeared. Hannah gripped Matt's sleeve tightly. She looked uneasy. Matt stepped toward the staircase, shining his light up to the second floor. A faint sound echoed, as if someone had just stepped back into the darkness. Rachel glanced at Daniel, her eyes questioning. He shrugged, pretending everything was fine. Matt placed a foot on the first step. It creaked. Nothing happened. He kept going. The second floor was narrower than they expected. 3 doors, all shut. The air was much colder here. Hannah shivered. The last door at the end of the hallway was slightly ajar. Darkness stretched beyond it. Daniel moved closer, resting his hand on the doorknob. Rachel whispered for him to stop, but he pushed it open. Inside was a small bedroom. A rusty bed, a wardrobe, and a large mirror leaning against the wall. Its surface was covered in dust, but still faintly reflected the dim glow of their flashlights. Rachel aimed her beam directly at the mirror. She froze. In the reflection, a figure stood among them, someone who did not belong. The figure in the mirror stood still. It was tall and thin, its face obscured by darkness. Rachel stepped back, nearly bumping into Hannah. Matt took a step forward, shining his flashlight directly at the mirror. The dim light cut through the dust, revealing small scratches on the glass surface. But the figure didn't disappear. It remained there, as if watching them. Daniel reached out and touched the mirror. Ice cold. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy. A cold draft slipped through the door crack, making the curtains sway. Hannah gripped Matt's hand tightly. She wanted to leave. Daniel slowly pulled his hand back. His palm was damp and freezing, as if he had touched something that didn't belong to this world. He turned to look at Rachel, but she just stood still, eyes fixed on the mirror. Matt was the first to speak. "We should go." No one disagreed. They turned around and stepped into the hallway. The flashlight in Daniel's hand flickered. A brief moment of darkness. When the light returned, the door to the room across from them was open. A cold draft poured out from inside. Hannah shivered. Matt pointed his flashlight into the room. It was empty. The floor was covered in dust. No footprints. But in the center of the room stood a wooden chair, and on it a doll sat upright, its head slightly tilted to one side. Its eyes were staring straight at them. Rachel stepped back. "We're leaving. Now." Daniel didn't argue. He turned and hurried down the stairs. Hannah grabbed Matt's hand and pulled him along. Just as they neared the door, a sound echoed from upstairs, like something heavy dropping onto the wooden floor. No one looked back. They stepped outside, slamming the door shut behind them. The air was still cold, but far more bearable than inside. Without another word, they got into the car and drove away. But as they turned off the dirt road, Daniel glanced at the rearview mirror. The house door was wide open, and on the porch the doll lay there, its head turned toward them. The car moved down the empty road, cutting through the dark rows of trees. No one spoke. Rachel leaned against the window, staring outside, though her mind was blank. Matt sat in the back, his hands clenched tightly on his knees. Hannah remained silent. Daniel was the only one who dared to look into the rearview mirror. The abandoned house faded into the distance, but the image of the doll on the porch remained burned into his mind. The car turned onto the main road, heading toward town. 10 minutes passed before Rachel broke the silence. "Does anyone else feel off?" No one answered right away. Matt glanced at Hannah, but she only lowered her head. Daniel stole a quick glance at the mirror. "It's just our minds playing tricks. Nothing really happened." Rachel didn't argue, but her fingers tightened slightly around the fabric of her shirt. They arrived at Daniel's place, a small apartment near the town center. The group went inside and locked the door. Daniel switched on the lights. The room brightened, but no one felt any more at ease. Matt sank into a chair, rubbing his forehead. "I'm not so sure this is just in our heads." Daniel sighed. "We didn't touch anything. We didn't do anything wrong. It was just an old house." Rachel looked at him. "Then what about the figure in the mirror?" Daniel didn't answer. Hannah stood up. "I don't want to think about it anymore. We should just get some rest." No one objected. That night, Rachel slept on the couch. Hannah and Matt went home. Daniel lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Everything was fine, no strange noises. Nothing happened. He closed his eyes. In his dream, he saw the old house. But this time, he was standing in front of the mirror. The figure was still there, but now it moved. A pale hand reached out from the glass and touched his shoulder. Daniel jolted awake. Cold sweat ran down his spine. He reached for his shoulder, the spot where the hand in his dream had touched him. The sensation was still there, ice cold and unsettlingly real. The room was pitch black, no sound. Rachel was sleeping in the living room. He wanted to get up and check on her, but something held him back. Not fear, something stranger. A feeling like he was being watched. He turned his head toward the corner of the room. The darkness was thick, but within it, something was there. Daniel switched on the bedside lamp. Light filled the room. Nothing. He exhaled, rubbing his face, just the lingering effect of a nightmare. Shaking his head, he forced himself to calm down and lay back down. But just before closing his eyes, he noticed something. The door to his room, he had closed it before. Now it was slightly open. The next morning, Rachel made coffee in the kitchen. Her face was pale, drained of energy. "Couldn't sleep?" Daniel asked, sitting across from her. Right. Rachel was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Did you dream about something?" Daniel hesitated. "Why do you ask?" Rachel tightened her grip around her coffee mug. "I saw that house." No one said anything. After a while, Daniel checked the time. Almost noon. He picked up his phone and sent a message to Matt and Hannah. Both responded quickly. Matt's message read, "We need to talk." That afternoon, they met at a cafe near the university. Matt sat with his arms crossed, tension clear on his face. Hannah was silent, staring down at the table. Daniel glanced at them. "What's going on?" Matt placed his phone on the table. "Look at this." On the screen was a photo, a familiar scene, the abandoned house taken from a distance. But something was off. In the second-floor window, there was a face, pale, and staring right at them. Daniel stared at the photo, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. The face in the window was blurry, but the eyes, those were real. Rachel pushed back her chair and hurried outside. Hannah sat frozen. Matt gripped his phone tighter. "What do we do now?" Daniel didn't answer. He stared out at the street, his mind empty. That night, he deleted the photo from his phone, determined to forget everything. But as the darkness settled, he heard it. 3 knocks, slow, from inside the mirror.